I kind of thought that circuses weren't real and that they were a fairy tale when I was a kid.
Brand on Tour with Angelika Tauber and Katrin Hansel, the podcast where personal branding meets sports.
As women, are we ever going to satisfy? Like that, we're always going to be too skinny or too big or too strong or too tall or too short. I was anorexic before I started circus, and joining the circus actually helped me break out of that.
There is no crying in circus.
Yeah, that is a phrase that has come from traditional circus, and I fucking hate it. Like, it comes more from the training perspective of kind of like suck it up mentality of when you're training and it hurts. Would you rather look better or perform better? Like, which would you choose? Like, fucking take up space, get strong, gain your independence. I went from being an elite athlete to not being able to stand long enough to make a morning coffee overnight. I think it's a good reality is like things can just be taken away from you in an instant and you have no choice.
Tami, you left home at 16 to join the circus. That sounds like a movie line.
Yeah.
What does the real version actually look like in real life?
So that's literally what happened. I kind of thought that circuses weren't real and that they were a fairy tale when I was a kid. And then at 14, the circus came to my area and I made some friends there. And then it's the only place I'd ever felt at home. So as soon as I was 16, I joined. My parents say I ran around and joined the circus. I say that I joined the circus. And yeah, that's how I started.
So how does the circus life actually look like? Because most of the people know about it from the movies. You know, we see these caravans with animals and with like people dressed up and clowns and acrobats, like driving on the train and going from town to town. How does it really look like? Tell us more about the behind the scenes that a normal person actually doesn't have access to.
Yeah, so that's like traditional circus, and I guess there's different categories of circus. And to clarify, yes, I joined a traditional circus. And yeah, you do live in caravans, you travel around, but it's not just getting up and doing shows. Like a lot of people think you just do the shows and that's it, but you put up the tent, you have to sometimes have rehearsals, you've often got training during the day, and then you have other tasks. So when you're on a small family show, you do everything. So that might be you're working in the canteen selling food before the show and at intermission. It might be during the day between shows, you're repacking like the games. You might be working in the box office and doing ticket orders. And then you have during the show, you don't just have your act, you're helping out backstage or taking things in and out of the ring. And then, and you help pack down the tent and travel. And depending on the size of your tent and your show, that could be anywhere from like putting up a tent can take one day if you have a big crew and a smaller tent to like 3, 4 or more days. And same for pack down.
And now it's been 24 years. So what has kept you in it for this long?
I love it. It's I joined because it was the only place that felt like home, and it still does. Like, it's one of the cool things about circus is you have this massive global family. So because everyone's always traveling and you're meeting new people all the time and working in different cultures, and you just get to, no matter where you go, there's always people to connect to, and you've always got that common thing. And one of the beautiful things about circus is its ability to transcend language barriers and race. And so while those things definitely can at times be issues that may come up in certain shows, for the most part, it's a really welcoming community, and you learn how to interact with people, but also communicate stories to people that, if they don't speak your language, you can communicate so much through that performance and connect with audiences as well. So it's just I love it. Plus, it's fun. It keeps you fit. It definitely beats an office job, that's for sure.
So did you travel around the world?
So I traveled all around Australia with the different traditional circuses, and then most of my career was in the corporate entertainment and special events industry. So I did like kind of Asia as well as Australia was my main domains. Depending on what your areas you work in, because there's different areas of circus, some people do travel around the world, especially if you're on, say, a touring production or a touring show. Then you might travel around. There's a lot of Australian artists do relocate over to Europe because there's a lot more opportunities over here than there is in Australia. But I had some commitments in Australia, so I just kind of stayed in Australia, and yeah.
You keep saying traditional circus, so I was wondering how many kind of circus are out there and what separates them from each other?
So I guess traditional circus is like where the roots of circus come from. And these days we also have things like contemporary circus, which is, I guess, like traditional circus is what you would think, what you were describing before, right? Mm-hmm. And then contemporary circus can be really anything. It's like draws on contemporary dance and physical theatre. And it's really, you can make it into whatever you want. But then you might also have something like Cirque du Soleil. It's a very well-known circus. You may have heard of it. It has, like, it's more a traditional circus, but that has contemporary, like, layers within it. So the way it's run in a lot of ways is traditional, but there's also contemporary elements. So it's kind of like a large-scale touring production. You also have like cabaret and variety style shows, which kind of pull from traditional circus themes, but like it's a completely different style of circus. And then, you know, if you're looking to have a career, then you might be someone who works in one of those. You might work in children's entertainment, which looks different. You might work in festivals, which might look different again, depending on what type of festival it is. And yeah, there's like just lots of different domains. But I guess the main, like, we normally classify as traditional and contemporary circus.
Wow, I really did not know that. I always pictured always the same kind of thing.
I wasn't aware of that either. Like, I thought there's circus and there's Cirque du Soleil.
They have a very good brand, right?
Yeah, like, an awesome brand, actually.
They're everywhere present.
They are the world's largest performing arts organization. And like, it is very common for people to be like, oh, circus, like Cirque du Soleil. Or, you know, that's just because that's the only association sometimes people have with circus. But there is many styles of circus outside of what Circus du Soleil do.
People probably hardly recognize that working at a circus is like high-end pro athletes, right? Like, you super really gotta perform. Like, how does your training and preparation actually looks like?
So I guess at the moment, because it's 24 years and towards the end of my performing career, so I don't train like I did when I was performing full time. And when I was training and performing full time, I would be training around 25 hours a week of just circus training. So there would be gym training on top of that, and plus coaching, or, you know, that doesn't include like walking everywhere. So that 25 hours is normally made up of conditioning, training different skills, rehearsing routines. But it's also important to think about it as, like, we call it like training fit and show fit, which might be, if you think of it in terms of some other sports, you have a game season and an off season. So what you're doing in your off season is increasing your capacity and your ability, whereas your game season, you're refining on performance and how do you execute that. And that's the same. So if you're on a contract, depends on the contract, but some contracts are really intense. You're not doing a lot of training outside of that. You also can't risk pushing yourself to the point you may injure yourself if you're trying new things. So you do have to take some less risks as well, but you might also have another contract coming up that you have to prepare for at the same time. So it's can be really tricky to balance the training load, and overtraining and not adequate recovery is a massive issue within the circus industry.
Why do people choose to have such a lifestyle? Because for me, it doesn't sound very comfortable. Let's put it this way.
Like circus hurts, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm primarily an aerialist. I have done ground-based stuff as well. I always like all of the different aerial apparatuses hurt in their own unique way. So and that's not to scare anyone off, but it's honest. And I find from coaching that if I'm honest with students, when I was like, look, it's a steel bar, you're squishy, we're not going to expect it to feel like fluffy bunnies, then like they have that expectation that, oh, okay, it might bite a little bit. But if you don't tell them that, then they don't necessarily expect that. But you get used to it. So like any kind of like pressure on your legs, you'll get used to that over time. It's just, you keep training through it. Obviously, there's times where you shouldn't be training through pain or injuries and stuff like that. But you do adapt over time if you're doing it in the right way.
But how is it then with the recovery? Because if you leave in those little, how would you call them, containers?
Like the caravans?
Yeah, the caravans. I imagine it's not very comfortable in terms of the beds and the whole environment. How does the recovery look like?
It depends on like the show that you're with or like how much money you have. A lot of the people in the shows have their own caravans. Some of the caravans are really nice. So like as someone who was always a contractor, I was provided with accommodation, which for the shows I was on was always a caravan. However, there is a lot of contracts these days where if they're contracted performers, they might be put up in an Airbnb instead. So, or if they're traveling with, say, Cirque du Soleil, they're put up in hotels and apartments. So, like the smaller traditional circuses, most of those do travel with caravans, but there's a relatively small family circus in Australia I know who had a friend of mine is from overseas and did a contract with them, and I just assumed she was in a caravan like the rest of the family and cast. She's like, no, I'm in an Airbnb. And so it's like, I guess it depends on the show and your contract and what you negotiate as well. But I would say if you're going to travel with a small family circus, I wouldn't think, if that's like you want that to be a career path, don't have the expectation that you would be put up in a hotel or an Airbnb, because there's often on-site accommodation in caravans. So if you're going to be really demanding about your needs with stuff like that, then that will limit who you can work with as well. So, but also part of it is like that experience of like living. I recommend anyone who's new to, performing career to go work with a traditional circus. It gives you life skills. You have to train all the time. Like you're fully immersed in it. Like sure, traditional circus life is not for everybody. But it is a life-changing experience that you can carry on into everything. Like the work ethic you get from having to be around a traditional circus and view it as more of a lifestyle versus a job in the hours you work is just so valuable for so many parts of your life.
Mm-hmm. As an aerialist, I assume heights and risk don't really scare you or don't scare you.
I'm scared all the time.
You were scared? Doesn't sound like actually.
Yeah.
And how do you end up doing it? Like 25 hours a week, every week?
Yeah, come on, unpack the secret sauce.
So, like, it's like this misconception that like we don't get scared. We do. It's you learn how to manage that fear. And they're like, sure, sometimes like fear is a spectrum as well, right? Like having a little bit of fear is actually a really good thing, or just because it makes you think. But, you're not going to do something reckless, which in my profession, the catastrophic end is you can die, right? So it's not a high-risk profession for no reason because people have died or ended up with like life-altering injuries. But it's like you learn how to manage the risks. You wouldn't be up there performing professionally unless you were competent. I do believe that if an aerialist wants to have a crash mat, like so a landing mat they can fall on, then they should be allowed to have one. I have been on many, many events and contracts where they're like, can they not have a mat because it looks more dangerous? It doesn't make what we do less dangerous. It just means if we do fall, we might walk away from it with less injury or with our life. But with the fear, you just, like, if it's too much fear, it's going to be a problem. So we want to, it's like exposure therapy, right? If you're really scared, we want to bring it down to a level that you can manage. And there's no growth without discomfort. It's just once we push it too far, it has a negative effect. But a lot of students, I've actually had a lot of students over the years as a coach who come to aerials because they're scared of heights, because they want to learn to conquer their fear of heights. And because they focus on what they're doing, not the height. So, and there's I'm really good at talking people through it and just, you can tell when someone's really scared and you just alter your voice, almost like that kind of meditative, calm voice, how I touch them in terms of spotting changes as well. But the amount of students I've had, they've been just terrified. And then years later, they're climbing to the top. And it doesn't mean they're not nervous, but they can manage that fear in an appropriate way now.
And how do you manage that fear? Do you use some sort of affirmations, or do you have some sort of techniques or thinking patterns that help you stay in control and not start spiraling into what if?
Yeah, so I guess when I'm going on stage before I do a show, I will do mental rehearsal backstage. I'll also not be doing the show unless I've had appropriate training. So I've rehearsed my act beforehand. I've done all my tech. So I would have, before I've got to the event, I've done a costume check and a gear check to make sure my costume's not going to get stuck. So there's less unknowns. When I get to the venue on the day, you should always have a rigging check. It's a little bit of a fucking pet peeve of mine at the moment, the amount of aerialists I've heard, sorry if I'm not meant to swear, that they're like, oh, we didn't get a tech run. And I'm like, you didn't even get to hang on your equipment before your show? That is a safety concern. You absolutely should at least, sometimes you don't have time to run your whole act, but you should be able to at least get up there, feel what it's like, and you're in a different space. Be aware of what's around. Is there a speaker hanging right there that you could kick so that you're aware of it during the show? And that stuff does happen. So you do all those things to manage risk. And then before I go on stage, normally I'll listen to my music. So I'm kind of mentally rehearsing it. I'll kind of just get in my zone, so internalize a little bit. And it's when you step on stage though, even though I'm still Tami, I'm not Tami as I am now. I'm you take parts of you on stage, but you've often created a persona. So it's it helps you with that. I will say for the height thing, I don't have very good vision. It's very helpful as an aerialist because you can't see how high you are. So, it's this misconception. You need to be able to see well to do aerials. For some things it does, but not what I do. Yeah, and you just work through it. But there's definitely been times that I've been really in a situation which is not ideal and safety starts to become a concern. And then we have to adapt something. So that could be, we're doing fabric, so tissue outside and it's windy. So you have to take out certain skills. Or you might, for the sake of something like tissue, you might have to cut the act completely. But you'd take out certain skills. You might have a backup plan in case something isn't going to work. It could be that it's really cold and you can't feel your hands. So I had one show, we were outside in 2 degrees. Whoa. And my bar was so cold and my hands were so cold because I'm just in a leotard, that I couldn't actually feel my hands. And I had a point where I just had to hang by my hands, and to make sure they were on properly, I actually looked at them. I was very early in my career, but I was are they closed? Yeah, they're closed. Okay, just keep that pressure. And
oh my God.
I was it was only a moment, but I was I had to just make sure that I was are my hands actually on the bar? And or sometimes you can get injured while you're performing. So I've known people that have strained a hamstring during a performance. So they've had to modify their routine in the air. Or I had an issue with this arm and my grip on this hand for a little while. So I often will go in for those high risk things with a backup plan of okay, so if I get to this point and something's not working, or if it's too slippery to do this trick because of my costume or the weather, because even say in a venue, the aircon and the machines change how slippery stuff is. So sometimes something's not possible. I'll go, okay, I've got option A, B, sometimes C, and I'll make a split-second decision in the moment to change something because the safety should always come first. And part of being a professional aerialist is knowing how to adapt to the conditions at the time, and conditions can change while you're in the air. So it's really important that you aren't so rigid in your choreography and your skills that you can't adapt to keep you safe, because being out of time with another aerialist or breaking away from a group choreo is never going to look as bad as you having a fall. And at the end of the day, it's your life. And if you have a fall, that could be the end of your career. So while breaking from choreo is like your last case resort, it's there as your emergency option, and you should follow that.
So how far does the show must go on actually go? Like, were you ever performing injured or when you were sick, for instance?
Oh, yeah, so many times. Like it's there's levels to it, right? And it depends on the circumstance you're in. Also, so in a traditional circus, if you're the family are more likely to just keep going. The contractors might say to step out a bit sooner than the family members would, because that show must go on mentality really comes from traditional circus. If you are in like a cabaret style show, it might be that they just pull your act if you're really sick. Depending on your contract, people like your pay might get cut. Like I've heard of people like losing contracts because they have they've gone, I'm injured, I can't, and they're like, you have to, and they've gone, no, I don't, this is not safe for me to do that, and they've chosen to walk away, or the people that have hired them have chosen to terminate the contract because they're like, well, you wouldn't go on stage. And it's at the end of the day, it's like, if you want to do this as a career long term, you have to look after you. But if you just have a little cold and you're like, oh, I'm not going to perform, it's like, well, you probably could. So it really depends on how unwell you feel and the circumstances of the show and what act you're performing. Like if you're performing a higher risk act versus a much lower risk act, you might still be performing when you're feeling much more unwell. Like if your act is, say, I don't know, like a comedy act or something where you don't have any physical, like you're a clown who just has some sort of comedy act that doesn't have any audience involvement, so you're not going to make someone else sick, or you're just, it's still not great for you, but it's not the same as like the high wire artist who's working without a lanyard, and if they put 1 foot wrong, like they fall 12 meters. So it's a very different risk analysis there. But yeah, in the families, it's like, most people, like, we only go out if like we really, really can't. And there's been very few times that I've not gone on stage. There has been the odd time as like working in corporate where I've been like, I'm too unwell, I have to get somebody to cover me. So someone else has had to learn a routine on short notice. Or like I had an injury once in a show, and I had a show the next day, and we had to train someone else up the next day to take over for me because I couldn't have performed.
Well, what I cannot understand is the inhumane demands that the people who give you contracts or the families, because first of all, these are your own people, these are your employees, you're a team, you should be together. Like, what is wrong with the culture?
I will say it's not all shows are like that. There is definitely some that are like that, but it's more of just a lot of traditional circuses were family. And it was like this close, like you only had those performers. And if someone wasn't in a show, then it meant more load on other people. So it's kind of like everyone does their part. And, if everyone was sick, then there's no show, which means then there's no income. And as a traveling show, like it is not just your job, it's your home. So you kind of look after it. So I guess like there is definitely, like every industry, there is issues in politics. There is things that are improving and changing within the industry. It just depends on who you work with.
And people choose this kind of lifestyle themselves, right? They are ready. They know that when they join a circus, they're gonna have to work nonstop, and they will have to perform sometimes through injuries. And you said there is no crying in circus.
Yeah, that is a phrase that has come from traditional circus, and I fucking hate it. It comes from it comes more from the training perspective of like, just kind of like suck it up mentality of when you're training and it hurts. But a lot of things that hurt don't have to hurt in the ways that they do, or they don't have to hurt as much as they do. And it was a very traditional circus approach of just training through injuries. It's like, oh yeah, you just kind of like slap it and get on with it, right? But it's like, that is not, if you want to have a long sustainable career and have less pain and more ability in your older age, then that is not the best way to treat your body. It's really hard when you're in your 20s and you're like really excited and slightly reckless and you want to do everything, to be like, I can just train through it. And then you get to your 30s, you're like, oh, right, that doesn't work as well. And then 40s or 50s, it's like recovery becomes far more important, which is why like there's some of us, like I learned the hard way through traditional circus, in that I had to teach myself almost everything in my first few years, and I learned through getting injured. And it's like, oh, we don't do that. Right, cool. So, and that's not a great way to learn, because I didn't have anyone to teach me Lyra. Like they were like, we have this thing in a truck, we don't know how to do it. No one really does it. I'd learned a few things on trapeze, and I had a video of a Cirque du Soleil show called Kidam. And like, I just had to get in the hoop and just like work shit out. And, I'd look at the shadows on the side of the tent to see if my shapes looked any good, which is not an accurate way to assess that. But it was like 2002, like the camera phones didn't exist.
Oh, that was
back then.
before YouTube, so you couldn't watch the tutorials,
No,
right?
I was already on like multiple contracts before YouTube. I remember when YouTube existed, because I was in Hong Kong when I first heard of it, and it was like 2008, and someone talked about YouTube. I'm like, what's YouTube? So yeah, like I was already 6 years into my career, I think, by the time YouTube existed. So like everything back then, you had to just work out yourself. And so my first act was like terrible, but I also learned a lot of things through getting injured. And so, which is not the way to learn, which is why myself and so many of like my generation of performers, which is always weird to say because so many of the people in my generation of performers are much older than me, because I started so young and they all started in their mid-20s or above. So they're like 10, 15 years older than me. But we're all like, so many of us are on this kind of trajectory of trying to change the way training practices are happening to make the industry safer, and that's how I've always approached, while I definitely have done reckless things when I've always taken good care of myself as well. And I've kept doing what I'm doing for as long as I have because of it. And anyone that has a career that lasts more than 10 years is because they commit to it, but they also look after themselves. Because if you don't, your career will burn out really fast.
That's definitely the health side of this job you've been doing now for 24 years. But then there's also the body image side. So what did that cost you in the past 24 years?
I'm very open with this, but this is a bit of a deep topic for some people. So, but I was anorexic before I started circus. I developed anorexia when I was 11 years old, and joining the circus actually helped me break out of that. So I was like, well, if I want to train, then I need to eat. I definitely wasn't eating enough, but like compared to what I had been eating, it was a huge amount. So from my personal side, it's been a journey. It's only really been in the last couple of years. I thought it was okay. And then I worked through the mental side I was like, oh, there's still some mental stuff there. Let's work through that. And now I'm like, I'm good now. Like, But for, there's a lot of people that come into the industry from gymnastics or dance, which are very well known for, body image issues or being told they need to be smaller. There is still, to this day, circus contracts that require you to submit your weight as part of the audition process, or have in their contract that you must stay at a certain weight. And while I understand that part of that is because of costume fittings, or you might be in a group act and stuff like that, most circus artists are underfed, and you are never going to perform at your best if you are underfueled. You will be so much stronger. You will recover better. You will have less injury if you eat appropriately. And it's, as an aesthetic industry, there is always a lot of pressure to look in a particular way. And there is people within the industry and shows that are out there trying to break that norm. And it is changing in some circles, but in other circles, it's really not. So I still see posts from time to time of old school thinking circus managers that, are shaming the size of the Aerialist. And it's no, she's strong and beautiful. She's not big at all. I have a booty. You can't tell because I'm sitting down. I have a decent amount of Spanish genetics. There's a booty there. It's never going. I was always bigger than all the other aerialists because I'm taller than so many of them. I'm not a tall human, but circus artists are small. But I'm taller. I've got a big frame. I've got a booty. There was a lot of oh, you're too big, you're too heavy, and just that push to try and stay under a weight, which was also not helped by my past anorexia, is you kind of just be I am big. And so it perpetuates that body dysmorphia and that undereating. And it's, for myself at least, it's only been when I've had some health issues that were out of my control and I had to just be forced to learn acceptance and the changes that happened with my body when I was that unwell that I couldn't train or do anything. It's well, this is the way that it is right now because of what's going on, and I can't change that circumstance. So it's what it is, and it will change when I get through this. So that for me really helped it, but I then was had in my head I needed to still get back to a certain weight. And then working with my dietitian, we did the numbers, and I was for me to get back to that weight would mean I would have to be at 12% body fat. I'm if I wanted to maintain the muscle I had. That I've never been that low, maybe when I was anorexic. That is not a sustainable body weight for any female in almost any circumstance, unless they're genetically just that's works for them. I know where I naturally will sit. And I was okay, I'm never going to be that weight again. I would rather keep my muscle. I would happily be 10 kilos heavier than that. And then I ended up 10 kilos heavier than that anyway. And I was okay, cool. And it's just, you learn to work through the body image stuff, but that has to change culturally as well. And it is, but
it's still a long way.
Yeah, it depends on the circles you work. And there's I went and saw my friend's show in London when I was there recently. And it's a whole bunch of they do it's called, can I say the name of the show?
Yeah.
So it's called Swamplesk, and it's all it's a queer show. They're all it's the story of Shrek. And they're all bigger performers, and they look unconventional and stuff like that. And at the end of the show, they get up and say, it's we created this because we were told our bodies didn't suit. And it is a fucking brilliant show. And they absolutely rock it on stage. And it's proof that you don't have to look in any particular way to be able to be a fucking fantastic performer.
Yeah.
So it is a burlesque show more than circus. But if you look at, this is where my issue is with aerialists should look a particular way, is if we line up, Olympians from all of the different sports and look at all the different body types, they all look different. So depending on your circus discipline, your body is going to look different as well because it attracts particular body types and your body proportions can impact that. And so I think it's awful to try and go, an aerialist needs to look this particular way when that's like, we all have different bodies and we're all doing different things. So why would we all look the same?
I guess it will still take some time for it to change in circus because it hasn't changed in society that much. Like I've always also been on the heavier side, and I always
Which is
felt
wild
so.
because I would not perceive you as a heavier person.
Right,
in the
it's all
slightest.
perception. But I am like 6 kilos more than I was 2 years ago when I was still playing indoor volleyball and was doing very consistent cardio and strength training. And now, because we play beach volleyball mainly, it's like you have to do your own training schedule and then you end up not doing it as regularly. And I always felt so bad about my body because of what is portrayed on social media and on the TV. And even my mindset right now, still, even though I'm trying to promote or fight for the body positive or like just accepting the way you are and finding yourself beautiful, I still sometimes struggle when looking at myself thinking, oh God, can you just like, I don't know, eat less and like lose a few kilos?
What you do is so much more important than what you look like.
Right.
And
of course.
Women historically have been told to eat less because it makes them smaller, that makes them, like they're underfed, so they're harder, like they resist more. It's like, fucking take up space, get strong, gain your independence. Like it's, I weigh 25 to 30 kilos more than I did at the peak of my career. And like, I've been unwell a little bit in the last year again. So I have definitely, I'm not at my fittest for what I would be at the moment. But like, do I have a little bit of body fat I could lose? Sure. But it doesn't mean that where I am now is like a problem. I can still do a lot. And even if I lost, a bit of weight, I'm never going to go back I'm never going to be 30 kilos later again. I don't want to. Like, fucking, I want these quads. And they're heavy, right? And also you can't tell like bone density either, right? So someone could be the same size, but someone could have like osteopenia or osteoporosis, which means they have, their bones are starting to weaken, which is, a problem for when you get older. And, I have a bone density which is like close to 1.5. Yes, that is a flex that I'm willing to make. 1.5 times my age. That is a fucking good thing. But that means that adds 5 to 7 kilos to my body weight because I've got extra bone. I would rather have that extra 5 to 7 kilos because 60, 70, 80-year-old me is going to be really thankful to have that if I fall because I won't break my hip.
Yeah. How does one check their own bone density? Because I want to know. Maybe that's the reason why there is that number on the scale and not another one.
So you can go for a bone mineral density test. Okay. I have no idea how you say it in German. But yeah, they take, depending on, you can go for a DEXA scan, which will be the whole body, but BMD is normally just like part of your hip and I think also your spine. I can't remember because what 2 body parts it is. But yeah, you can have it checked. And if you have certain medical conditions, it's advised you get it checked every couple of years anyway. Especially if you're someone who's been at risk of osteopenia or something like that in the past, they'll often recheck it. So went full physio nerd there, but yeah.
I just want to say that having the specific image of how an athlete should look like hinders me a lot in my own performance. And I mean, I'm talking amateur volleyball level, good amateur volleyball level, yeah? But because I believe that since I don't look like those very skinny girls where you can see the muscles very clearly and the bones, I will not jump as high or I will not be that fast. And that is just a belief.
Bullshit. That is
right?
absolutely a belief. Yeah.
And I'm certain I'm not the only one who feels the same way, because you are taught to think you have to look like this to be able to do this. And so when you don't look like this, you convince yourself that you can't have those results that others can. And I always feel that way. I go to a tournament and I look at those girls and I'm like, fuck, like I'll probably play worse than them just because they look stronger or fitter, but that doesn't mean that they are, because I do CrossFit and cycling and running and all kinds of stuff. It just does not show in my body that way.
And like there's, leanness is a few different factors. It's like, whether you have a visible six pack or not, like why the fuck has society decided that's a measure of like how healthy and fit you are? Because it's not. Like obviously nutrition is a component to it. Muscle mass is a component to it, but genetics is the biggest component of it. And, like as women, we carry more body fat around our hips and thighs. So to have as clearly defined quads for some people is just not a thing. But having, I put it to people this way. It's like, would you rather look better or perform better? Like, which would you choose if you had to choose?
I guess if I could believe, or I would know that I do perform better and I wouldn't need a visual proof, because that's what plays the tricks with your mind, that like you see and you think, okay, you can't do that because you don't look like that.
Yeah.
But if I could convince myself mentally that I perform better even though I look this way, then I would choose that.
So you will always perform better. Everyone will always perform better if they are adequately fed and have appropriate recovery, right? So if you are underfueling if someone, not saying you specifically, but if someone is underfueling to maintain a visual, then they will always not have as good of recovery. They might feel more tired all the time. They're going to be more prone to injuries. Like there's some really serious side effects of underfueling, like REDS and stuff, which we don't have to get into. This is a whole another podcast. But it's like, there's a really famous, just give an example of someone who I think is excellent, is there's a rugby sevens player from the States called Alana Mayer. And she talks about body image all the time. Like, she's a rugby player. She's tall. She's fucking built like, you look at her, you're like, you're a fucking weapon. And she's always like, someone tried to shame her BMI during the Olympics. Like, she's an Olympian. And was like, this person looks like they're a 30 BMI. And she's like, yeah, I am. I'm like 29 point something. She's like, the funny thing is I'm at the Olympics and you're not. Like, she's like, yes, I have some excess body fat, but you know what that does? Make me fucking perform well. And like, she looks fucking amazing. So that was a lot of F-bombs in one sentence. Really passionate about it. But like, if some people can look in any way, and it's like, it's that mindset of try to focus more on what you can do or what it can fuel versus like what it looks like.
Yeah. How is it for you? Like, what would you choose? And what is your experience? Because I know you had kids and you also are not like the leanest person. You told me that.
As a young athlete, I would definitely chosen how to look like.
Right.
Because you're not mature, right? You just want to look good, especially in sports where your body image and your appearance has an impact on the entire situation. And I mean, we used to play in bikinis.
Right. And just
nowadays it's different.
For reference, Catherine used to do trampoline jumping, so also quite crazy, risky stuff.
Trampoline jumping in bikinis.
No, in leotards. But beach volleyball in bikinis and trampoline jumping in leotards. But still, it's very same as for you, right? You're supposed to be small and skinny. I'm not small at all. Like, I'm 175. And I was never the skinniest in the room.
But
it was hard for me
also
as a teenager.
Proportionately, your height is going to mean that your frame is going to likely be larger than the person who's only 5 foot.
Absolutely. And I understand this nowadays, but I didn't when I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, actually, now putting it that way, I think at 13 or 14, I would choose looking better.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to remember is that, like, I'm 40 this year. And, in the 1990s and like that impression, 1990s and early 2000s, and what was really pushed through the media and, what our parents adopted really also influenced, our generations of behaviors. And over the years, it's like, strong became more acceptable for women to have muscles and stuff like that. And we have started to see like that kind of heroin chic, ultra like underfed look coming back. That's what, triggered mine a few years ago. I was like, what the fuck? I got so angry about it. I was like, oh, I still got some unresolved things there. So I worked through that and I'm like, I'm good now. But there is more acceptance of it, and I think there will continue to be pushback. But it's never won yet. But I think, and this is a conversation that comes up in, publicly a fair bit, is like, are we as women, are we ever going to satisfy like that? We're always going to be too skinny or too big or too strong or too tall or too short, or like there's always that conversation of like, where do you fit? And it's like that comes back to like, as an athlete, what particular way are we meant to look? No, we're not the same. We should never expect to look all the same. And I think people like Simone Biles is a tiny human. Like she's I think 4'8" or something, but she's a fucking machine. Is anyone going to try and tell her that she needs to eat less? Like, look at the power that woman can produce, right? Like she is, and she advocated for mental health, which is a whole like massive conversation around mental health in athletics as well. But like, I think having people like Simone Biles and Alana Mayer and these women that are incredibly strong and performing at elite levels as role models is something that we didn't have. And it gives me a lot of hope for the next generations moving forward that they may be more resilient on that. So we just have to keep the good fight going, I think, for them so that they don't have to go through what we did.
Tami, let's talk business, because now you are a founder and you're a business owner. What exactly do you do?
So I run a company called Aerialicious, and I started that as an entertainment company. And we were one of the most prestigious aerial suppliers in Australia for the corporate and special events industry for over a decade. And then COVID hit. And things had kind of changed since then. And as well as not just the industry, but my business as well. So I also have Aerialicious Studios, which has been my coaching studio since 2018. And I run my studio a bit differently to a conventional studio in that we don't run group classes. I teach private lessons. We have training jams, workshops, and open training. We don't run continuous group classes because I wanted to offer a space that solved some of the gaps in the industry of that students couldn't find times to do the lessons at times that suited them. And so I provided a space for that. And now we use that as well to help other coaches run their own lessons so that because they can't get into spaces at, prime times because there's classes on. So I have a space that's set up for teaching private lessons and running workshops and training at times that suit people. And yeah, I really love it.
Was transition easy for you from athlete career into having a business? We've heard a lot also already on this podcast that many former athletes experience an identity crisis that really prevents them from fully embracing their new role or finding that new role and that new identity. How was that experience for you?
I think I've definitely gone through like athletic identity stuff in the past, but I haven't noticed it too much with the business transition, I guess, because I was running the business and performing. And then I was also coaching, and so I'd switch between coaching and performing, depending on like if I was on contract, I'd coach less. If I wasn't, I'd coach more. And then over the years, especially when I was at university, I coached more than I performed, partially because COVID happened, but also coaching was much more consistent to fit around. And then I guess now where I'm trying to take things and grow things is like it's a whole new world to learn. So like that I think is more of the identity shift is like the changes in the lifestyle. So earlier I said about I see circus as a lifestyle, not a job in terms of hours that you work. And my lifestyle in the past would have been train, go to the gym, coach, do a show, everything focused around that. But as a business owner, you spend a lot of time on your computer and, trying to build Aerialicious Studios and Aerialicious into this big vision that I have means there's a lot of time doing that. So it's a very big change in lifestyle, which I'm still finding my feet. But with the athletic identity, because I've had various health issues that have been things outside of my control over the years, I guess that has really helped. So acceptance is one of the big things. So, I was really unwell. I went from being an elite athlete. I had a reaction to an anesthetic. And I went from being an elite athlete to not being able to stand long enough to make a morning coffee overnight. And that was really hard. And I spent the better part of a month in bed and I couldn't stand for more than a few minutes at a time. And that's when I did lots of acceptance around the body, but also around my abilities and my capacity. I was like, well, I can still do some things, but I have to accept where I am now because I cannot push through this. I can't just be like, oh, shall we write and push through and work through the injury. I literally couldn't even walk around the block.
Sorry, that was in a reaction to an anesthetic?
Yeah, I had a general anesthetic for a routine endoscopy. I had a sedation. And I have had many. I have a medical condition we check every couple of years. And I woke up and something was really wrong. And it kind of got a little bit brushed off. And within, by the next day, I was like, I am still not okay. And yeah, by the end of the next day, I was like, I can't even stand to make a cup of tea. And it was years of going back and forth with hospitals and specialists. No one knows really what happened. I've never fully recovered. I never will. But I am significantly better than I was. But it was it should never have happened. No one knows why. We've done all the investigations, but yeah, it was I think it's a good reality is things can just be taken away from you in an instant and you have no choice, right? So, learning acceptance of this is where you are right now and accepting that it's if you're going through even say it's just a tough period of your life, say a loved one's passed, or say you're going through a divorce or anything. It's this is what this season of your life is right now. It doesn't mean it's forever. But if things change with your body or your physical capacity right now, that doesn't mean you're less of an athlete. It just means right now there's another focus.
Wow, that feels so crazy that this can be taken away from you without your control, without anything overnight, and from something that seems so ordinary, so simple, just general anesthesia, you do your simple procedure and then next day your whole career taken away. Crazy.
Well, now to your next career. I know it's now, we are literally in an emotional valley, so let's come back to your business idea and Aerialicious and what you actually do in business. Alongside to your business, you're also building your own personal brand and you're now creating contents.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It's, I guess I've always created content for my businesses and as a self-employed, aerialist, I've always posted my performance work as a tool to try and get performance work. But now it's different. So I'm still navigating that footing. As a coach, I'm well known within the industry for the way that I coach, but it's I just coach and it's trying to work out, what is it that I do? And then people don't come to me necessarily for the skills that I can do now. It might have been skills that I could do 10 years ago, but they actually come to me for my brain. So I have always had this reputation of being the fixer of if someone can't get a trick, they get sent to me because I'll be able to problem solve it and give them drills to work towards. And it's but to get, demonstrating a trick doesn't, being able to do a skill doesn't mean you can teach a skill. They're completely different skill sets. And too many people think that if someone can do it, they can teach it. So it's for me with the content, I'm trying to find that balance of showing the flashy stuff and the pretty stuff that gets the like attention or the clientele to be like, oh, like you've done the thing, and balance it with content that it's like, well, I can teach the thing, or, you know, what is it in my head? There's 24 years of knowledge up there, like extracting that and getting it into content so that, you know, my whole goal is always been make the industry safer and more sustainable. It's like, but if it's all living in my head, how do I help that? And the best way to have a bigger impact is through social media and through content. So the more I share, the more impact I have, and the industry then by default becomes safer.
Absolutely. This is a really great example of why people should use social media. They have access to something that can reach so many people at once just by making a video on your phone. How much time do you spend creating content every week? Because let's be honest, this is a very time-consuming part of the job, and I can imagine that you bring a lot of this circus mentality into your business of like working super, super hard. And how do you balance that? Do you balance that, or do you end up overworking and maybe not taking care of yourself so well?
So work sometimes definitely takes over. It's not that I enjoy it still, like, but in terms of how much time I spend each week on content, the actual creating of the content, like thinking of the idea, filming it, writing it, that often doesn't take that long. The editing of it and putting it together, and then even the scheduling of it across multiple different platforms and multiple different accounts and stuff, like that's the time. Like the editing and the scheduling, I find takes so much longer. And I think there's this, yeah, definitely. I feel like if you film like a video that's like a minute, it's probably going to take you 3-4 times longer to edit it. And the longer the piece of content is, the more it's got to be edited. So probably way too much time doing that. But again, like I see in terms of the hours I do, I am approaching business as a lifestyle. So in terms, I don't believe in work-life balance. I think that exists for people that hate their job. And they, you know, they try and balance out something that they don't like, and they just want to switch off and do something else. And I think if you thoroughly are enjoying what you're doing and it's integrated into your life, you don't need to balance. Like I've been away from, like I'm at the end of 6 weeks away from my studio, and I am itching to go back. Like, you know, I've been working the whole time I've been traveling, but you know, like sure, I want downtime. I work long hours and big weeks by choice. But then if I want to go have time off, it's the quality of that downtime is like, you know, I need less of it because I'm going to invest really good quality of like, I'm going to the beach for the day and I'm going to leave my phone at home and I'm not going to be on my phone, and I'm going to just like, it's that mindset of like this, I'm training recovery almost, or I'm training my downtime because this is the recovery for my brain to reset, and then I go back and recharge. So sometimes I only need like, my busiest times, I've given myself like a 10-minute window, and that's been enough because that's all I had. That's definitely not enough recovery time when you're doing a 16-hour day. But yeah, sometimes like an hour or two or even a half a day is more than enough. And I'm like, cool, I'm ready to go. Sometimes it's like 2 days, but if I have a full 2 days, I'm like, I'm bored. And it's not because I can't stop. It's because I'm just like, I've recovered enough, and you build up that capacity over time. So if you're used to doing a 40-hour week and you suddenly have to do 80 hours, you wouldn't go to the gym and go, I've only ever lifted 20 kilos. I'm going to try lift 100, right? Like that would be ridiculous. It's the same with like how much workload capacity can you manage? Like you can work it and you become more strategic and you become good at doing things at the same time.
Mm-hmm. These are the type of the life skills that you took from your career in circuses.
Yeah,
I understand, like actively planning the recovery and then working really hard on what you really believe in.
Yeah, and you have some things that in like life and business that are fixed with like when you have to do them or deadlines, but there's lots of other stuff that can be flexible. And I'm a really big believer in working to your strengths and what suits you. So like I am not a morning person. at all. So I don't coach in the mornings. I don't get up at 5 a.m. and go for a run, which this is the normal in Australia. This is not for me. I would much rather be I know my brain works best between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. So if I'm like, I need to do like really deep work focus, I am most likely to do it at midnight. So, and, you know, also I switch. So like if I had to sit and just do something for 8 hours, in most cases I won't be able to. But if I've got like a 4-hour window to do this admin, and then I'm going to go coach 4 hours, and then I'm going to do another 4 hours of admin, then, you know, it's much easier to get it all done because it doesn't feel like you're doing one thing for a long time. You're switching every like 3-4 hours into something new. So by the end of the day, you're like, oh, I've worked like 12 hours, but like you've enjoyed all of it. And yeah.
That was such a beautiful saying. Like there was so many things I will definitely personally take away, and I'm pretty sure even our audience will take so many different things and parts out of the interview from today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much,
for having
Tami.
me.
Thanks to you for being with us today. See you next time at Brent on Tour. Bye.